Adam, did you help Kim with her speech today?
No, I did not help Kim with her speech today. She killed it though. It was good.
Oh yeah, she nailed it right, just as good as could be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, he fired me up a little bit.
Yeah, he wasn't subtle, was he?
No, not subtle at all. And honestly, I think it was better for it. I think you have to call it. I think you have to say it exactly like it is. I think you have to actually be willing to stand up and do that, because I mean, if you're not willing to stand for anything, if you're not actually willing to put your actions where your words are, then I mean, why would you say anything to begin with? And I think, especially here, the best way to be able to put a stop to a lot of these things is to make it so that it's not acceptable to happen in public. I mean, it's a little bit of public shaming, but at the same time, it's more of saying, look, that in our society is not tolerated, and we're not going to allow it to be tolerated or be done in the open. And I think that is something that, right today, especially, we saw people driving by with the Betsy Ross flag. We saw people with the Confederate flags hanging out the back, honking, trying to rev their engines, trying to drown out the speakers. And, anyone, congressional candidate, whoever, if that's the symbol for your campaign, is a Betsy Ross flag, the same flag that white nationalists are now using, then you have, number one, you should not be running. And number two, you need to be publicly shamed. Like, we cannot treat that as okay anymore.
Yeah. And it's,
hey guys,
it's very hard. Okay.
Unfortunately, and I'm sure that Tom, he really considered everything. He says it's not so much of an issue with technical stuff. It's more of an issue, he said, he feels like it's very partisan, dealing with the Democratic Party, and he's more of a progressive, and he's worried about the partisan nature of it. I asked him if he could further explain that to me. He said that's really all he could say on it.
I'm confused, Chris. He's running for the Democratic nomination, is he not?
Yes, and I kind of brought that up, that this is literally the Democratic nomination, and that this is going to be partisan, that this is the Democratic Party of Putnam County, and that's when he told me that he really didn't know what else he could say. That's really all he had to say.
And we haven't heard from Phil Dodds either?
Nothing. I reached out to him. I asked him, like, if he could give me a reason. He said that he may not be able to. He said he would not be able to attend yesterday. I asked him if there was a scheduling conflict, if there was something we could do to accommodate him, if there was a way possibly, if he needed some technical advice, just to see what we could do to help him. I'm not sure. I haven't heard nothing back. I'm not getting nothing from his campaign, so I don't know what's going on. And you know how politics works. You're here one day, you're gone tomorrow type stuff. So they might be restructuring. I don't know.
Okay, well then let's get started. I mean, we've got this set up and we've got people that want to ask questions, so let's do it.
I would like to apologize to everybody on this. Unfortunately, sometimes things like this happens. This is a unprecedented time in our country. We're having new ways of doing it, technological. This is how it's going to be going forward. So I guess there's going to be a curve going forward, and we're seeing it now. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Richard from the Putnam County Democratic Party, who would like to invite you all to come out and vote.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. It's been a great election season for the primary. We've had three excellent candidates for Congressional District 3 who have come around to the various places in the county, including Putnam and including an event today. And I thank all three of them for being involved, reaching out to the voters that are outside of the urban area. It is very difficult to connect with rural voters. It takes time, it takes energy, and every minute you can spend pays off, but probably not quite as much as paying off if you're going door to door in Alachua. Our goal tonight is to talk about Congressional District 3 and the candidates who are challenging to replace the seat that Ted Yoho has term limited out of. he set himself up with an 8-year limit and left with a real showcase in Congress. All of us will be talking about that for a long time. There are 10 Republicans running to fill that place or fill that seat to run against one of the 3 Democratic candidates. We're fortunate tonight to have with us Adam Christensen, who is one of the candidates. We had invited all 3 candidates to attend the event, but for various reasons they were unable to. But I'd like to start with welcoming Chris. And Chris, if you could give us a little bit of introduction of yourself, and then we'll see if we can have some questions that the audience can throw to you. So Chris, welcome. Or Adam, rather. I'm sorry. I'm looking at 2 different screens here. Adam Christensen is our candidate. And Adam, I turn it over to you.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm excited to be able to talk to y'all, be able to really field whatever questions that we have. And just like Richard said, we cannot ignore the rural parts of our district anymore as Democrats. Right now, we focus so much time and energy in Alachua, but if we're actually going to be able to flip this district, if we're actually going to be able to build the infrastructure that allows us to have staying power here and be able to hold any seats whatsoever, then we have to broaden our reach. We have to bring in everyone. We have to be able to talk to everyone, no matter their background, no matter where they live, and we have to at least make the effort. I mean, what we're seeing right now are unprecedented times. We have to be able to adapt no matter the situation. We've been in a pandemic now for almost 6 months. And we've had to go completely online. We've had to be able to figure out the technological issues. We've had to be able to reach people in ways that nobody else has ever had to before. And that's not going to change. The election is coming up in less than 90 days, which means that if we haven't gotten this figured out now, if we haven't started building the infrastructure now, if we have not started getting to the people that we need to be able to reach now, then we've already lost. We can write the election off. My campaign is not going to do that. Every opportunity that we can possibly get to be able to talk to the people all over the district, we're going to take it. Today, our team was out in Palatka at a rally. Right now, in Putnam, in Palatka, there is a Confederate monument outside of the courthouse. And at this point, they will not remove it, despite the fact that the majority of people want it removed and they understand that it should not be there. So what we have to do at this moment is we actually have to sit down and we have to have these hard conversations, but we also have to actually establish ourselves and build structures, build political power, build the infrastructure to be able to get our message out to people. And we have to actually be willing to do it. Right now, if we're not able to figure out Zoom, then we're not going to be able to campaign. If people were not able to be on this call tonight that are candidates because they could not figure out Zoom, then they should not be running for office. And so right now we're done with excuses. We are going on the attack and we are actually taking our messages to a place that it's never been heard before. And we are out organizing everyone, Republicans, Democrats, it doesn't matter. We are creating the organizing power led by young people so that we can actually do something that has not been done before and not just leave it to chance. So I really thank you. I am excited to be able to answer whatever questions we have. I am excited to talk about our campaign and the vision that we have for the future and how we're actually going to accomplish it.
Yes, I'm Roy Smoot. I vote Republican, but I vote for America. I don't vote just if somebody better came along as a Democrat, I'd vote for a Democrat. I was listening to Richard speak a while ago about, I had one question only until I listened to y'all speak a while ago about the Confederate flag and about the monument and about boarding people when you're riding down the road. He happened to be on the other side of a situation where he was the majority, being white. He was the majority. I happened to be on the other side where the white people had to go to a black school where it was mostly blacks versus mostly white and a few blacks. I was the minority. So, when y'all start speaking about how ignorant it was back then, I never noticed it. I was in a black school and we fought for almost 2 to 3 months when we first integrated. Wasn't for hatred up because we were all been working together in the fields.
Well, if we could get to the question, that would be wonderful.
I want it's because they were saying stuff about the Confederate flag and the Confederate soldier, and that hit me hard because see, I'm Southern, and it's not a matter of the Confederate didn't take and attack, the Northern soldiers. The Northern soldiers came down and attacked us. And what I'm saying is we need to take and get that out of the equation because we didn't have racism down here. I never knew what racism was when I was younger, and I grew into the Deep South.
Well,
Okay,
what
now
was your question regarding
back
that?
to the question is I sat here and I watched debates on the Democrats and Republicans, and I'm proud of my leadership in the Republican Party now being President Trump. Not because of anything, but he says something, even though sometimes he says too much, he still says stuff and he does stuff. He actually makes stuff happen. Are y'all really happy with your leadership? Because see, we need two parties. We don't need just one party. But are y'all really happy with what your head of your party is doing, making lies up and doing what they're doing in public? I mean, this information age.
So I think the ultimate question is, are you ultimately happy with our national party leadership?
Yeah, Roy, no. Am I happy with our national lead? No. I grew up a Republican. I grew up in a very conservative family. And the one thing that I knew and that I understood and that my entire family understood is that neither party at the end of the day really cared whether or not I was going to live or die. They did not care what happened to my family. And the reason I think that is because both parties, they don't listen to the people. They only listen to people that will get them elected, that will give them money. And at the end of the day, those people, they're not people, they're corporations. They are the reason that we don't have good paying jobs anymore. They are the reason that Walmart has come in and knocked out all the family businesses and replaced them with jobs that pay a third. At the end of the day, I think it's a lot to do with class. I think that there are a lot of poor people that are white. There are a lot of poor people that are black. And what we have been told for generations is that the reason that we are poor and the reason we cannot get a good job and the reason we cannot build ourselves up and actually achieve the American dream is because we don't work hard enough. But what I understand now, and I think everyone is starting to understand, is it's not because we don't work hard and it's not because we're not doing our best and we're not fighting for survival and fighting for everything in our lives. It is because we actually have people stopping that from occurring. My grandfather has been a farmer in Iowa for 60 plus years. 40 years ago, the towns around them started to dry up and just leave. They were disintegrated. And the town of Harlan, Iowa kind of looked around and said, well, why is that happening? And they looked around and they saw that there was one company who kept moving in near it, near those towns, undercutting all the prices, driving out all the good family businesses that have been there 40 or 50 years and replacing them. And they were replacing them with jobs that paid a third. And so for us, it's the same thing in Palatka. I understand a lot of what you are saying, but at the end of the day, I grew up learning and believing, and I was taught that it doesn't matter who you are or what you look like, you are a person and you have value. And I think we have to start there first and foremost. On top of that, we have to understand that unless people are actually able to survive, because right now we're not. Both parties decided that they were going to give $6 trillion to the biggest companies in the entire world, and they were going to give us a $1,200 check maybe. 12 years ago, they decided they were going to give billions in bailout money to the banks and ask us to pay for it and invest in those banks. And we never got that money back. We never actually got a return on our investment. I mean, if we're going to be businessmen, we understand that our taxes, what we pay, what we do, it should be an investment and it should have a higher return on investment than what we pay. And we should be getting that back. And right now we're not getting that back at all. Because if we were actually getting back what we were owed, we would have healthcare for everyone. If we were getting back what we were owed, we would actually have good paying jobs. Our entire lives would not be so expensive. If we were actually getting back what we were owed, we would have universal childcare and all of our education would be covered. And so I am not asking for anything radical, and I am not saying that we need anything radical. I am simply asking that they give us our money back and they stop focusing on trickle down economics and giving the money to the top and hoping someday it gets down to us, and actually start with us, start with the fundamentals of business, start with the base and build up from there. Because if they had actually given us the money, if they had given us $2,000 a month to get us out of this crisis, then people would not be on the verge of bankruptcy and homelessness right now. We have 28 million people that might lose their homes, that might lose everything. And yet we decided we were going to give money to the banks, and we we're going to make sure the banks would be okay, but those banks are still coming after us for our mortgage. So by giving that money to the bank, it's just a sugar high. It doesn't help anything. It doesn't help us. It doesn't help small businesses, which have just gotten annihilated. And yet we gave money to airlines. It makes no sense to me. And so I understand exactly what you are saying is it doesn't matter who you are or what you look like. Everyone needs to be taken care of. And the working class, the small businesses, they should be prioritized. But neither party has done that for 40 or 50 years. And that's why we are where we are today economically.
And I agree.
That is a great answer, and I think it's a great example of what progressives across America are dealing with. That is my Trump-supporting father, and I love anyone who can shut him up for a minute. So great job. And on to our next one. It is Sarah. She is a correctional officer out of Union County, and she would like to ask you a question.
Sergeant at a correctional institution in Union County. And my question is, how do you feel about police reform, and what are your plans to correct the culture in corrections?
So I think that this one is an even larger issue. In this campaign, we talk a lot about root causes as opposed to just putting on Band-Aids. So the example I like to give is, if you gash your leg open and you let it sit there and you just put a Band-Aid on it for 2-3 months and it gets infected, but you just keep swapping out the Band-Aid, nothing's ever actually going to get better. It's never going to fundamentally change and actually get fixed. And I feel like right now in our society, that is what we do. We put the money in to put the Band-Aid on, but we never actually go in and clean out the wound and stitch it up and make sure everything's going to be okay. And so when it comes to police reform, when it comes to correctional officer, when it comes to prisons, that is what we've done. We haven't been willing to actually go in and fix the underlying and root issues. Instead, we're just willing to build larger cages with more beds. And so right now as a society is a question, and I think we have a great opportunity to actually reframe what we focus on and why. Like I was talking with Roy a little bit ago, the emphasis needs to be on people. No matter who you are, it needs to be on people and making sure that people are going to be okay. And right now we are more concerned with spending money after the fact. We are more okay with spending money on the consequences of inaction than actually preventing a lot of these things from happening. What we understand is that if we were to put up the money before crime happens, if we were able to put up the money and invest in services that would prevent these things from happening or prevent crime from happening or prevent everything that we're dealing with, we would never have to spend so much money on correctional services. We take the example of the police force, right? I mean, the police are not trained in mental health. They are not trained in dealing with unhoused and homeless individuals. What we should have is we should actually have funds to be able to allow for experts to be able to do that and not force our police officers to respond to those situations because they haven't been trained to, and they're not experts in that. And what we are doing is we are asking people to do more than they ever should have to. And so what I think that should be done is, number one, we need to actually pay people who work in correctional facilities and our police officers well. They should be paid well. But a lot of the things that they do right now, they shouldn't have to do. For instance, whenever somebody calls with 911 because of a mental health breakdown, we should not be sending a police officer to deal with that. And we should not be asking police officers to make the hard decisions when they go there. And on top of that, bringing a gun to deal with somebody who's having a mental breakdown is really not a good idea. We have experts that deal with that all the time. For me, I have actually had to deal with I was arrested in Polk County while coaching a high school soccer game at a Christian school. Someone called and said that I was trespassing while coaching the game, and my assistant coach was trespassing while coaching the game. And they called because that my assistant coach was Brazilian, and they thought that he needed to go. And what happened was the police officers threw me up against a fence as they walked me out. They punched me in the groin. They smashed my face, shoulder, everything into the ground. And then I spent a night in a private prison. What I realized was if that can happen to me, in those circumstances, and on top of that, the entire system was designed to extract money from me, despite the fact I'd done nothing wrong, then it's happening to a lot of people that I've never met. And that was done in front of 200 people, including parents of kids at a high school soccer game. I cannot imagine what is happening right now. And so right now we are defunding our schools and giving money to increase our police force. I think we should be funding our schools so that we don't need as big of a police force. And so it's more of a way of thinking about these things. How can we be preventative instead of just constantly reacting to everything? Because if we are reacting, then we've already lost. We have to be proactive from now on. We have to actually fund the things that would allow us to not have to react every single time. And so that's.
Would you support a fair tax?
Absolutely not. Here's why. A fair tax is a scam. And we have to call it what it is. My job is to catch corporate fraud. Like my job is to protect small and family-owned businesses from being taken advantage of. A fair tax would actually hit you and me the hardest. People who actually work for a living, they would get hit the hardest. It would let corporations off the hook. It is a corporate wet dream to not have to pay taxes anymore, just like Amazon does. Why? Because that allows them to take advantage of small and family-owned businesses. And when you let them off the hook for that, and when you say you no longer have a stake in our society and we're not going to be actually making you have a stake in our society, we get not just what we've had for the last 40 years, we get a worse version of that. We get it where we have corporate cartels and monopolies that own every part of our lives. And so, no, a fair tax is not fair. A fair tax is actually going to hit the poor and the middle classes the hardest. And at the end of the day, the people that will benefit the most are hedge funds, are New Jersey bankers, are billionaires who already are stealing our money, and it's going to benefit predatory companies. So a fair tax is probably the worst possible tax that we could possibly have. And the only reason people know about it is because billions have been spent in order to promote it over the years, especially by think tanks like that are put up by the Koch Foundation, the John Birch Society. We have all of these different people that are funded with dark money in order to make sure that dark money is legal. And so, no, at the end of the day, a fair tax makes no sense whatsoever. And it would actually harm us economically. It would harm us and small businesses and actually destroy a lot of our economy while giving tax breaks to the people who have already been scamming us and taking our money for years.
Question came from Sandy out of Interlaken. She is wanting to know, with the current COVID situation and children staying home from school, how are they going to be taken care of as far as childcare and education going forward?
Right now, they're not being taken care of. I mean, there's a couple things we could, this is what I'm talking about, being proactive versus reactive. We have a pandemic. We knew we were going to have a pandemic, and there were a lot of ways that we could have lessened the blow of the pandemic for small businesses, for our schools, for our teachers, and for our kids to make sure that they would actually be safe. We didn't decide that we were going to actually make the internet a public utility and make sure that broadband got out to all parts of our district and all parts of the country. That should have happened. The reason it didn't happen is because we have monopolies like Time Warner, like the other, services like Comcast, and they have controlled those markets. On top of that, we didn't have universal childcare to be taken care of in the first place. We didn't have after-school programs funded to the extent that they should have been. We didn't have anything in place to make sure that you were not worrying about making enough and going to work to actually make a living, but also making sure your kids were taken care of. That should have been fundamentally fixed before the pandemic, and we've only seen how much more needed it actually is. So we have a plan to actually implement universal child care. which has an ROI of 1.25. So every dollar that we put in, we get $1.25 back, and it's a great business decision. It's a great investment. And at the end of the day, we get our money back. I refuse to really put any policies or plans in place where we don't ultimately get our money back and where we don't make wise investments. I was always taught that you have to be good with your money. Growing up, that's all I was ever taught. Be good with your money, make sure you're not spending more than you bring in, but at the same time, if you need to invest in something, make sure that you do it and it's going to be worth it. So universal childcare. On top of that, right now, we don't have the ability for teachers to be safe at school. We don't have the ability for kids to be safe at school. All of the ways that would have allowed them to be, we don't have. And so right now, sending kids back to school is just not feasible until we get the pandemic covered. And that's not going to happen until, one, we have a vaccine, or we have completely covered healthcare for every single person, because we're in a pandemic. And if we don't have that, then nobody is safe. It doesn't matter if you have healthcare right now. If one person doesn't have healthcare, no one is safe. And until we take care of the pandemic and we make sure that hundreds of thousands of people don't die, then we're not going to have an economy that recovers. If we don't take care of that first and foremost, we are not going to be able to recover. We are not going to be able to get back to where we were, and we're not going to be able to be safe again. And so sending kids back to school right now, in every country that has tried it, it has exploded their COVID infections. It has exploded new cases. It exploded death. And we cannot put our kids at risk like that. On top of that, you should not be forced to go to work just so you can pay to make sure that your kids are going to be watched for the day. What should have happened, and like I mentioned with Roy, what should have happened was we started where every other country did, which like Canada and Spain, and we made sure that everybody got $2,000 a month to cover mortgage, to cover rent, to cover your food, to cover all the basic necessities. And that way, if you were laid off, or if you're not able to go to work because it's too dangerous, or if you had kids, you would be able to stay home and you would be okay. But we didn't do that. And so emergency income of $2,000 a month would be one way to be able to lessen what happens and actually allow us to get past this, and allows our small businesses to continue and actually survive. Making sure that broadband is a public utility and we're able to build the infrastructure so everyone, no matter where you are, has access to high quality, affordable broadband. And on top of that, we have to make sure that childcare, universal childcare, is implemented, because it would be a middle class tax cut. It would save families $8,000 to $10,000 a year. And that's money straight back in your pocket that you are not spending. And so it would leave people a lot better off, and it would cover and prevent the effects that we are seeing from a pandemic, or something that we don't understand or we don't see coming. Because if we're not ready to prevent things like this, then we're not ready. And if we're not going to spend the money to actually prepare ourselves so that we don't have to hit the worst effects of it, then we're not doing our job. And if the government is not doing that, then they need to be gone. They need to be replaced. Because until you put people first, if you're not there to put people first, you shouldn't be in office. That's all I'll say.
Thank you. That's a very good answer and a very thorough answer. We had planned on this having more participants, so we were going to allow, obviously, each campaign to have a question. It would be kind of pointless, I guess, to allow you to ask yourself a question. So I'm going to put Richard on the spot as someone who's fairly knowledgeable, I think we'll all agree, with Putnam County politics. Let's see if he can. We'll play Stump Adam. What do you got, Richard?
My goal is not to stump Adam. My goal is to find a candidate who can represent the critical needs of a rural area. We have underemployment. We have the brightest kids leaving the county because they go off for education. The jobs aren't here when they come back. We've got a tax base that, relative to the rest of the state, is declining. We've got a long history of representation in Congress in which the goal has been to, quote, preserve taxes, and only when it's the Republican in charge do we give money back to the county. So my challenge to each of the Congressional District 3 candidates is describe how you can address the issues at a rural area where we're trying to get our heads above water while the rest of the world is going faster than we are, so that our kids have a chance and our retirees can maintain a decent life. And that's a very broad question, but if you could give kind of the priorities and parameters of an answer, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. So one of the biggest things that we can do, and you just mentioned it, number one, we do not have good paying jobs in most of our rural places. And that is not because the people couldn't do it. It's not because we don't have the resources. It's not because of any of those things. It's simply because of, number one, political will, and also who we have allowed to run our society and actually take those jobs. We don't have very many family-owned grocery stores anymore because we have large chains that have moved in and wiped them out. And so what we have to do is we have to implement, it's a federal jobs guarantee. Basically, what we have to say is if you want a good paying job and you are willing to work, we're going to provide you a job, and you're not just going to be fighting for survival anymore. You're actually going to make enough to have a really decent life. If you work 8 hours a day, you should be able to afford a home. You should be able to start a family, and you should be able to have money left over at the end of the week. Right now, we don't have that. And so there's a couple things that we do. One, we implement a federal jobs guarantee. That's what we do. On top of that, we need to make it so that there is locations and the ability for people, if they want to start a small business, a family-owned business, if they want to keep it in their actual community, that they need to be able to do that. And so the building behind me actually is the Innovation Hub in downtown Gainesville. It is designed as an incubator program that allows people that have an idea to come there, get very cheap rent, very cheap space, have mentors that walk you through the process of starting a company, and actually be able to do it and work you through it. And if you have an idea, and what we need to do is we need to start setting up locations like this that run as a not-for-profit, that have the resources, that allow you, once you have saved the money from Medicare for All, once you have saved enough money from universal childcare, which if we implement both of those, just about every single person will have $18,000 back in their pocket every year. But we don't want you to just spend money on extra expenses when you have that money back, because there's no point in us getting more money if we're just going to be spending it on expenses and our lives get more expensive. What I want to be able to do is allow and empower people to take those savings that we have and take their lives back and set up buildings like this one in Palatka, in Stark, in Clay County, in Union, in Bradford, and say, if you have an idea and you want to do it, we're going to have a space. We're going to have a body and an institution of people in a collaboration of people that are all doing what you are doing, so you have support. And we can keep those jobs here, because the one thing we can no longer do is bring in companies, and that money does not stay in our community. It just goes to New Jersey, or it goes to New York, or it goes to another country like Nestle is trying to do on the west side of Gainesville by stealing water from the Santa Fe River. And that money does not stay here. It destroys our communities because that money goes somewhere else. I want to actually bring the money into the community where it stays, and we have an influx of cash instead of constantly sending it out. And I think that if we focus now on family-owned businesses, small businesses, and give people a piece of their community back, that's going to benefit all of us. And we can do that with, one, a federal jobs guarantee, which means we have good paying jobs in every single location, almost like a Tennessee Valley Authority, but for North Central Florida. And two, we make sure that we have small and family-owned businesses that are coming here, and we have locations to grow them, and we have the support to grow them. And I think that if you're able to do those two things, Palatka looks a heck of a lot different. I think Stark looks a heck of a lot different. Keystone, we start to see much more stable communities, and communities that people want to live in and people are coming to live in instead of just leaving.
Okay, if I can follow up on that, if you don't mind. One of the things that occurred in Putnam County and Clay County was the creation of Clay Electric when Jacksonville Electrical Authority refused to move way back in the 20s to bring a utility service to the area. And you've kind of referenced that with the Tennessee Valley Authority. Could you elaborate a little bit more about how an independent authority can revitalize an area and generate a quality of life change at a cost that is not excessive from the federal government perspective?
Yeah, so the cost is not going to be excessive. I mean, this is something that we have to do anyway. Right now, and you know, it's almost a double. It's actually kind of cool because you can take care of two birds with one stone. I mean, we focus on the federal jobs guarantee, but right now we are going to suffer the effects of severe climate change, whether we like it or not, and we're already going to pay for it. We are going to be paying, whether or not we want to, for the effects of climate change. Our farmers already pay for it. They are seeing huge differences in crop per acre. They are seeing huge differences in what they're able to grow at what times. And so we either, again, pay for the effects of something happening, which is way more expensive, or we pay for preventative measures. And so the investment that would go into exactly what you were saying, creating infrastructure, creating, electrical infrastructure, creating actual solar energy infrastructure, creating those kind of things is actually going to save us money in the long run. It's going to bring more jobs to the local areas. And at the end of the day, it's good for the community. And so just like you said, we need to have not only localized infrastructure, but we need to build it. And we have to do it very quickly because as we've seen, especially with hurricanes, people are going to be fleeing up and down the coast. That's not going to stop. It's just going to get worse. But if we can have it so that they are actually, and those people that are fleeing and the migration is actually stopping in Palatka, or it is stopping in our towns here and actually bringing money to our communities, that's going to be a lot more money to our communities. And so it's a couple things. It's really about thinking about how we can actually bring money to the community and how we actually can build things that last, not just things that are temporary. And so just like we saw in Tennessee and Kentucky 50, 60 years ago, those jobs will revitalize the community. It will bring more work, it'll bring more people, and it will bring more money to our local economies. And I think that if we're able to do that, things change dramatically.
Okay, Chris,
Is there
did
part of
another
that I
question
didn't
come? I'm sorry. No, you did fine on that. Chris, did another question come in through the chat?
No, we're good. I was going to give Adam a chance to go ahead and say goodnight. And then if you would like to encourage everyone to come out and vote, Richard, and then I would like to get the last word in on the behalf of the Free Promise Project.
Okay.
Chris.
What I'd like to, I'm sorry, I'm hearing somebody in the background. Okay.
They've been muted.
What
Sorry.
Okay. What I'd like to do,
Chris,
first,
it's
Adam,
me.
thank you.
I'd like to
Thank you
ask
very
you-
much. And it was actually great talking to you this afternoon in Palatka. Appreciate you coming over and spending the day with us. I want to make very clear that the Putnam County Democratic Executive Committee is very happy to have the forum. The fact that we only had one candidate does not represent an endorsement from the DEC. We do not endorse prior to the primary, so I want that absolutely on the record. After the primary, come the 19th, we're going to work hard as all get out for the person who does win the primary and provide an endorsement. We encourage people to come and volunteer directly with candidates. And if you feel that you want to do it locally with the local Democratic Party in your county, please do that, whether it's Alachua, Putnam, Bradford, Union, Clay, Marion. We're very happy to have you as part of our effort to get a Democrat elected, because we've got a horrendous record of Ted Yoho having been in the office, making small talk about doing good things for the office and for the people of the county, but actually bringing in next to nothing relative to the amount of taxes that went out, and doing nothing to address the essential problems except say, okay, guys, it's your problem, and here's some token money, and let's sit around and talk. And now I've done my job and I'm a hero, and I get the press. You guys go do the work and you have the accountability. That does not work. And I think that needs to be very much a part of the campaign of anyone who is challenging Yoho and they say, well, we're going to do what Ted did to improve our county. Ted Yoho did not improve our county. He did not improve Bradford. He didn't improve Marion. He didn't improve any of the district that he belonged to. But he did fulfill his obligation as a staunch far right Tea Party person, saying, let's fight everything that has to do with federal government. And we're in a situation that Putnam doesn't have the resources to pull itself up by the bootstraps. We've got maybe the boots, but we don't have the laces anymore. and we need the help from Washington to make that happen. And I very much appreciate everyone listening. Chris, do you need to say something before I give Adam a chance to make a closing remark?
Chris with the Free Promise Project, fpphelps.com. And I just want to let you guys know, while Richard may not be able to give Adam an endorsement, I would definitely thank, and he would agree, that thank you very much for coming out here, reaching out to Putnam County. It is so nice to see that we're not being forgotten. It happens so often. It's refreshing to hear the answers. Thank you for shutting my Republican father up for a minute. I appreciated the silence. And I kind of want to reach out to everyone out there watching this. I want you all to understand that the difference between activism and slacktivism is the difference between I'm going to do something about that and somebody else should go and do something about that. If you guys want to get corporate money out of elections, if you want to get good progressive candidates like Adam up there and support sending them to Washington, and you want to keep corporate money out there, then you need to get out there and help spread their message.
Okay, thanks, Richard. Thanks, Chris. I'm a little disappointed right now. We had an agreement to do a debate between the three candidates, and two other candidates backed out. At this point, we cannot afford to take our foot off the gas. I mean, we have the Republicans and the people that have been screwing us for years on the run. Ted Yoho voted for the largest corporations in the world 100% of the time. He voted to raise middle-class taxes 92% of the time. That's somebody who tells us that he cares about us, and then as soon as he gets to Washington, it's clear that he doesn't. And if we put somebody who's the exact same person as him, just with a different face and a different name in office, we're going to get the exact same thing. And so what we have to understand is that right now, unless we actually fight the root causes of the issues that we are facing, regardless of party, regardless of what you call yourself, unless we actually put the focus back on people and we put the focus back on justice and making sure that we are all taken care of instead of people in corporations that we'll never see, we've never met, and that they only come for our money. If we don't actually put the focus back on where it needs to be, the United States will not survive very much longer. Teddy Roosevelt in the 1890s, he said in a speech that monopolies and robber barons were killing capitalism. They were killing the free market. And if we did not fight them tooth and nail, that the United States would not exist for very much longer. We are back in that spot again over 100 years later. And unless we actually focus our energy and our time and our organizing on removing the people that have allowed that to happen, and I'm talking about Ted Yoho, I'm talking about his donors, I'm talking about his backers and the people that got him elected in the first place and are trying to get his former campaign manager elected now, if we do not remove them from power, then nothing will ever fundamentally change. Right now, we cannot be focused on party. We have to be focused on who has our interests at heart, on who is going to vote and pass legislation that actually helps us and not somebody else. The working class has been absolutely decimated in this country, and they have been forgotten for far too long. The poor and the hungry, they have been forgotten for far too long. I was taught growing up in the church that the greatest radical of all time spent his time not with the political establishment, not with the elite, not with the religious leaders of the day. He spent his time with the poor and the hungry and the sick, the people that were rejected by society, the people that society did not care about. And he created a movement focused on them with their help. And what we are seeing now is we are seeing that here in North Central Florida with a pandemic where 28 million people are soon going to be homeless. Because if they don't care about us, then they should not be in Washington. If they're not going to protect us, then they have not done their job. And I don't care what party you are in, if you have corporate interests and you have hedge funds interests and you have the people that have stolen pensions and 401ks and people's entire livelihoods, if you have their interests at heart, then guess what? You don't work for us, you work for them. And so right now we are an entire campaign who are run by young people who realize that we don't have a choice. We have to change the way things are, or we're not ever going to be able to afford a home. And right now we have an opportunity coming out of this pandemic, number one, to fix the way things are, and number two, fundamentally change the priorities as far as who gets money, why they get money, and what services we understand as basic and essential and necessary. And I am excited that so many people have jumped on board with us. I am excited that we have gotten so much grassroots support, because we're not taking any money from any of the people that we are fighting against. We're not taking money from the fossil fuel companies. We're not taking money from any corporate PAC. Because if we are not funded and run and organized by the people, then we are nothing. And so I really appreciate you all taking the time tonight. I appreciate you tuning into this, this debate. I appreciate you caring enough to watch. Because right now, if we do not care enough to watch, if we do not care enough to show up to a debate, if we do not care enough to actually go into every part of the district and every part of every county and talk to people and make sure that people understand that they are important, then we're not doing our jobs. So I appreciate you all for showing up. I appreciate you for having me. And I hope that you have a wonderful evening. And my camera is doing something and I don't know what it's doing, but it should work at some point. Thank you all for coming. Have a good night.
Thank you very much, Chris. And for Adam, appreciate you spending the time with the Putnam people, both today in person and live with the stream tonight. It is imperative that everyone who cares about the future to vote. And you've got your vote in the primary. We have 3 candidates. Choose the one that you feel is best to represent us in Washington. And come the November primary or November election, there is no excuse for any Democrat, any person with a non-party affiliation for not voting and getting this country back so that America belongs to the Americans, not to the wealthy who live all over the world and take the money with them wherever they want to go. So thank you very much for being with us tonight. Okay, Chris, it's yours.
All right, thank you all for joining us. If you want to finish taking the poll, you're welcome to. If you want to leave, that's great. Thank you for joining us on Facebook Live, and